to me, this proposed potential overlap date is not nearly the most interesting thing in this article. The Women's Basketball League, calling itself Project B, has announced its first tour dates, and they could overlap with the WNBA calendar. The Startup League, which plans for its inaugural season to begin in November and extend through April, said this:
54 games. Let that number sink in for a second. The WNBA just proposed increasing their season from 44 games to potentially 54 games in their new collective bargaining agreement. That's not a gradual expansion. That's a 23% jump in workload. And the timing, it couldn't be more chaotic, because this proposal dropped while WNBA players are already signing contracts with competing leagues overseas.
For a new collective bargaining agreement, the union is still waiting for a response to a proposal they submitted close to Christmas, according to sources familiar with negotiations. That's hilarious. The owners still haven't responded. That's the biggest well, we're good. Well, it's not going to happen. We're not even entertaining that. In fact, we think your proposal's so trash that we didn't bother to respond.
Here's the situation the league is navigating. The WNBA submitted their CBA proposal to the Players Union right before Christmas. That proposal included a $5 million salary cap and a share of net revenue, not gross revenue. The players countered with a $10.5 million cap and 30% of gross revenue. And the owners? They haven't even responded to the players' counteroffer. Radio silence. That tells you everything about how far apart these two sides actually are. But buried in that league proposal was something that changes the entire landscape of women's basketball: the expanded schedule. According to sources familiar with the negotiations, the WNBA wants between 50 and 54 games starting as early as this season.
Before its turn? Nah, forget it. That would be a breaking point for me too. This is where it gets very interesting. Among the league's other proposed items was an expanded schedule. We have not heard about this, to my knowledge. I have not. I knew it was rumored, like before last year, etc., that eventually they would try to add on more games.
Think about what this means practically. Training camp could start in mid-March under the new proposal. The finals would extend into November. That's a massive shift from last year, when training camp didn't begin until April 27th, 2 weeks after the draft. The current CBA already allows the league to start training camp as early as April 1st, but they've never used that option. Why? Because the NCAA Final Four happens the first weekend in April, and the WNBA has always avoided competing with their own talent pipeline. Now they're proposing to start training camp while March Madness is still happening. Multiple league sources are expressing confusion about this timeline, questioning how you run training camp while college players are still competing for championships.
Oh, that's interesting. And maybe they could go to 54 games. I don't know. It depends on how that's laid out. The league's proposed start date for training camp is as early as mid-March, with the finals ending in November. A number of league sources expressed confusion over a potential mid-March start date, questioning how training camp...
And here's where Project B enters the equation. This new 5-on-5 league announced their inaugural season runs from November through April, with tournaments staged across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Their Tokyo stop is scheduled for March 26th through April 4th, 2027. That's not a full season commitment. That's 8 to 10 days at a time for these tournament stops. The contrast with Unrivaled couldn't be starker. While Unrivaled locked players into a full domestic season in Miami, Project B is offering global exposure, 5-on-5 basketball, and a schedule that theoretically works around the WNBA payroll. Kelsey Mitchell and Sophie Cunningham have already signed, and there's a real question about why we haven't heard more player announcements. Has the Players Union instructed athletes to keep these signings quiet while CBA negotiations are ongoing?
Just that quick, from 44 to 50, provided they agree on the games, which I'm guessing they are. Look, if these players want to make more money, they're going to have to play more games too. That's a thing. And like I said, I knew it was coming. They've steadily increased. They went from 40 to 44, and I thought the next jump was going to be 48. Looks like they're going straight to 50. And then they're trying to get to 54. I think in like 10 years it's going to be 60 games. And that's where it's going to end, probably.
Now let's talk about what 54 games actually means for the product on the court. The league went from 40 games to 44 games, and most analysts expected the next jump would be to 48. Instead, they're proposing to leap straight to 50, with 54 games potentially phased in over the life of the CBA. That's likely how this breaks down. 50 games in year 1, maybe 52 in year 3, 54 by the final year of the agreement. For context, Caitlin Clark just played 44 games in her rookie season. Under this proposal, she could be playing 50 games as soon as next season. That's 6 additional nationally televised matchups, 6 more sellout crowds, 6 more opportunities to grow the audience that's been driving record ratings.
Now, you're talking about a matter of, let me just look once again. We're talking about the Tokyo stop being, so it'd be a conflict potentially of 3 games. My guess would be the WNBA would ignore that. That's my gut feeling. They would literally be like, okay, training camp's going to start April 6th now, and avoid Project B.
But here's the calculation the players are making. More games means more revenue opportunities for the league, more broadcasting inventory to sell, more ticket sales, more sponsorship activation. The question is whether the players see proportional compensation for that increased workload, because right now, the two sides aren't even in the same universe on revenue sharing. The league offered net revenue sharing. That means players only get a cut after the WNBA turns a profit. The players want 30% of gross revenue, which means they get paid regardless of whether the league is profitable. That's the fundamental divide that's stalling these negotiations.
There are certain areas where the league and another league could play nice, and if it's a matter of 3 days, why not figure it out? All right, because look, the one thing this league is going to give you an advantage of that Unrivaled's not, number one, it's 5-on-5. Number two, it's touring globally. That is going to help the WNBA, even though it's Project B, because it's bringing a larger audience to women's basketball. Instead of Unrivaled just being played in a dugout in Miami somewhere.
And this is where the competing leagues become leverage. Project B isn't just another overseas option. It's a professionally organized global tour that gives players international exposure while playing the traditional 5-on-5 format. The WNBA might not want to accommodate Project B's schedule, but they also can't ignore that their top talent is signing with this league. If the Tokyo stop runs through April 4th and WNBA training camp starts in mid-March, you're looking at a 3-week overlap. The league could easily adjust and start training camp April 6th to avoid the conflict. But will they? Or will they force players to choose between honoring their Project B commitments and reporting to WNBA training camp on time?
Wow. 54 games. Tell me what you think. Are you down with another full 10 games? My gut feeling is it'd probably be like 3 or 4 years from now. But it sounds like we might go to 50 right off the rip if they get a deal done. Players.
Here's what makes this particularly significant. The WNBA has every incentive to play nice with Project B, even though it's a competing league. Why? Because Project B is bringing women's basketball to global markets. They're building the sport's international profile in a way that ultimately benefits the WNBA's long-term growth. It's 5-on-5 basketball featuring WNBA stars played in front of new audiences in Asia, Europe, and the Americas. Compare that to Unrivaled, which has become something of a punchline. A 3-on-3 league played in a single venue in Miami with limited media coverage and minimal cultural impact. Project B is offering something the WNBA should theoretically support: global expansion of the women's basketball brand.
2027, through the end of April 4. The 5-on-5 League is a global series of tournaments in Europe, Asia, and Americas. So I guess what I am supposed to take from this is basically it's going to be around 10 days at a time, 8 days at a time. Wow, for that much money?
So let's game out the scenarios. If the WNBA and the Players Union reach an agreement on the CBA, we could see 50 games as early as this season. That would be historic. The league has been gradually expanding, but this represents a major commitment to becoming a more substantial product. 50 games gets you closer to a legitimate regular season where standings matter, where consistency is rewarded, where teams can't coast through a short schedule. But if negotiations break down, if the players opt out and we're looking at a potential work stoppage, then all of this is moot. The schedule expansion, the training camp timeline, the accommodation with Project B, none of it matters if there's no season.
You know, at this point, the tournament tends to be the best advertisement of women's basketball outside of a Caitlin Clark game that there is. It's literally Caitlin Clark and then whatever's going on in the NC2A tournament. That is the best advertising of women's basketball. The league and the WNBA, the Players Union, are currently in a stalemate in discussion.
And that's the leverage point. The owners submitted their proposal and haven't responded to the players' counter. That's not negotiation. That's a power play. The message is clear. Your demands are so unreasonable. We're not even going to dignify them with a response. But the players have their own leverage now. They have alternative leagues offering guaranteed money. They have Project B providing international exposure. They have options that didn't exist 5 years ago. The owners are betting the players won't actually walk away from the WNBA, that when push comes to shove, the prestige and platform of the league will keep players at the table, even if the financial terms aren't what they want. But that's a risky bet when you've got players like Kelsey Mitchell already signing with competing leagues. Here's what this all comes down to. The WNBA is at an inflection point. The league just experienced unprecedented growth, driven largely by one player's arrival and the cultural moment around women's basketball. They're trying to capitalize on that momentum by expanding the schedule, extending the season, and maximizing their media rights value. But they're negotiating with a players' union that watched the league generate record revenue and wants to see that reflected in player compensation. The gap between a $5 million salary cap and a $10.5 million cap isn't something you bridge with minor adjustments. That's a fundamental disagreement about the league's financial reality and the players' share of that pie. The 54-game proposal is ambitious. It shows the league believes in long-term growth. It demonstrates confidence that the audience will support a longer season. It creates more inventory for broadcasters who just invested heavily in media rights. All of that makes business sense. But you can't implement a 54-game season without the players agreeing to play those games. And right now, the players are looking at a proposal that asks them to work 23% more for what they consider inadequate compensation. The salary cap offer is less than half what they're requesting. The revenue sharing model is fundamentally different from what they want. So the owners are gambling that the players will accept the expanded schedule because it comes with some salary increases, even if those increases fall short of the players' demands. They're betting that the alternative leagues aren't sustainable long-term options. They're betting that players won't sacrifice their WNBA careers over this negotiation. But consider what happens if that bet is wrong. If players decide that Project B plus other overseas opportunities actually provide comparable or better compensation without the politics and media scrutiny of the WNBA, if the top talent starts viewing the WNBA as one option among several rather than the pinnacle of women's basketball, that's the risk the league is running by stonewalling the players' proposal. Because the leverage has shifted. 10 years ago, the WNBA was the only professional option for American players outside of going overseas to play in obscure league. Now you've got professionally organized alternatives with real financial backing and global ambitions. The mid-March training camp start creates another pressure point. If the league insists on that timeline while players are committed to Project B tournaments, someone has to blame. Either the WNBA accommodates the competing league's schedule, or they force players to choose, and forcing that choice could backfire spectacularly if players choose Project B. There's also the NCAA conflict to consider. Starting training camp during March Madness sends a message about priority. The tournament is the single biggest advertisement for women's basketball outside of Caitlin Clark games. It's where the next generation of WNBA stars are showcased. It's where casual fans engage with the sport. Competing with that for attention seems counterproductive, unless the league believes they've reached a point where WNBA basketball is a bigger draw than college basketball. That the professional product has eclipsed the amateur game in cultural relevance. That's possible, given last season's rating. But it's also presumptuous to assume that momentum continues without the specific player who drove most of those numbers. The 54-game schedule would give us more Caitlin Clark games, more rivalry matchups, more opportunities for storylines to develop over a longer season. That's appealing from a fan perspective, but it also means more wear and tear on players who are already playing year-round between the WNBA season and overseas commitments. And that's another element of this negotiation. The players want more money partially because they're being asked to do more. Not just more WNBA games, but more promotional appearances, more media obligations, more investment in growing the league's brand. The workload has increased dramatically, and the compensation structure hasn't kept pace. So when you see that the owners haven't even responded to the players' proposal, understand what that silence represents. It's not just negotiation tactics. It's a statement about who holds power in this relationship. The owners believe they can wait out the players, that economic reality will force the union to accept less favorable terms. But the players have never had more leverage than they do right now. The league needs them more than they need the league, at least for the top tier of talent. And if this negotiation breaks down, if we're looking at a delayed or canceled season, the damage to the WNBA's momentum could be catastrophic. The league just convinced broadcasters to invest heavily in media rights, based on projections of continued growth. If there's a work stoppage, if the season is disrupted, those projections fall apart. The networks lose faith, the sponsors get nervous, the casual fans who just discovered the WNBA last season move on to something else. That's the real stakes of this CBA negotiation. It's not just about salary caps and revenue sharing percentages. It's about whether the WNBA can capitalize on this moment of unprecedented attention, or whether internal conflict squanders the opportunity. The 54-game proposal could be brilliant or disastrous depending on execution. More games means more revenue potential, but only if the product remains compelling and the stars are actually playing. If players are injured from the expanded workload, if they're resentful about compensation, if the quality of play suffers, then more games just means more mediocre basketball. So here's the question. Was proposing a 54-game schedule while offering a $5 million salary cap a serious negotiation strategy? Or was it designed to fail? Because those two numbers don't seem compatible. You can't ask players to work significantly more while offering compensation that's less than half what they're requesting. Either the league believes the players will cave and accept those terms, or they're prepared for a prolonged negotiation that could threaten the season. And given the silence, since the players' counter-proposal, it seems like the owners are comfortable letting this play out, even if it means risking the momentum the league just built. What do you think happens here? Do the players accept an expanded schedule for less money than they want? Does the league increase their salary cap offer to make 54 games palatable? Or are we heading toward a work stoppage that could derail the WNBA's best opportunity for sustainable growth? Let me know in the comments, because this negotiation is going to define the league's future for the next decade.